So the one thing I can tell you is they're not going to be like us. These things that we're building are not going to be people. And these things that we're summoning into the world now are not demons, but they're not good, they're not evil. The same way that you don't care about an ant is the same way they're not going to care about you. There are entities that are not going to be aligned with what we want.
There's a plan and a scheme to merge man with machines, to reprogram our genes, to replace human beings with something obscene, a transhuman dream, a self-aware robot that can't be redeemed, a puppet on strings with programmable brains, a mixture of iron and clay in its veins, the Ego Man seed with nanotechnologies, and demo the mark of the beast artificially, bypass the boundaries of death and biology, instantly stop all decay, reverse entropy, quantum computer control powered memories, customized bionic babies in factories, born with androgynous genderless pedigrees, grown with no souls, without an identity, molded identically, all grown synthetically, alchemically, merging their minds with technology, entranced and enthralled, a chance to evolve, a trance that has captured, enchanted them all, a plan that involves transcending the fall, transhumanist movement, translucent cabal, entranced and enthralled, a chance to evolve, a trance that has captured, enchanted them all, a plan that involves transcending the fall, transhumanist movement, translucent cabal, like a morbid assortment of Frankenstein forces, control rigor mortis and zombified corpses, distortions like hybridized flesh-covered cyborgs, assortments of warlocks and sorcerers, shaman imposters who summon up automaton monsters, homunculus minions, mechanical demons. Long ago are their wands and their rattles and chants, or their voodoo-like trances and drumming and dancing. Advanced are the hijinks and latest contraptions with gadgets and gizmos to seek their distractions, adapting to tap into unmapped dimensions, to overlap quantum and tangled connections. Bizarre spooky action control from a distance, like visitors come to assist us. There is no resistance and no one's suspicious. They're wicked and twisted magicians and their mission is endless. Entranced and enthralled, a chance to evolve, a trance that has captured, enchanted them all, a plan that involves transcending the fall, transhumanist movement, translucent cabal, entranced and enthralled, a chance to evolve, a trance that has captured, enchanted them all, a plan that involves transcending the fall, transhumanist movement, translucent cabal.
This transition is really, really massively important for our entire species to navigate, and nobody is paying attention. This thing is happening in the background, and underneath it all is this rising tsunami that, if we're not careful, is going to wipe us all out.
you for joining us in live broadcast. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. I do want to apologize to the previous hosts and the listeners of the previous show. I did not mean to knock y'all off a few minutes early, and so my bad, and I hope that you will forgive me. But I do know now I will definitely not touch base and log in until top of the hour. So my bad again, and I really apologize. But I am joined this evening. Uh, Here we go. For what for whatever reason, we're not hearing the background music until the very end. But I do want to again apologize to the previous host and the listeners of the previous show. I've been logging in a little bit early and disrupted your program, and for that I apologize. I do hope that you will forgive me, and now I know different and better. But I am Zen Garcia. I'm your host for Momentary Zen, and I do appreciate all of you joining us in live broadcast. Joined by my good friend and co-host for this evening, Aaron Moffat, in our once every other month broadcast on all things esoteric. And so, Aaron, are you there, sister?
I am, and I have a terrible cold, so excuse the voice going in and out. I feel fine. I just sound bad.
Okay, well, it's not a problem, and I appreciate you coming on, even if dealing with whatever you're dealing with. There are a lot of people. Um, I don't know if it's the change of seasons or what, but a lot of people are getting sick, dealing with allergies or whatever. But how have you been the past couple months?
Yep, pretty good. I don't know if I want to ask this before I forget because people are asking if Rob Skiba is doing okay. Speaking of people getting sick, so I said I would
We
ask.
did, yeah, and we did get an update on our on the post that I had put out. Somebody that is in contact with Sheila says that, yeah, as far as his sickness and what he was contending with the hospital, that it was more with the establishment, and he is, from what I understand, getting better. And I think a lot of us felt that he was maybe more compromised than he was, and I'm not, certain to the extent. But anytime you're in the ICU, it can't be good. But and especially if you're having breathing complications, hopefully you never did have to use anything like a ventilator. But yeah, I will be reaching out to him. I had to go to the doctor myself today. Didn't have a chance, but I'll be reaching out to him very soon to find out, where he is and his health and well-being. But I do ask that everybody please continue your prayers for him and his family. And Rob's a fighter, a warrior, and so prayerfully he will get through all of this and regain his strength and in recovery be able to do the work that he's been anointed to do. And so um, yeah, so that's my prayer as well. And thank all of you that have reached out and that have um, done your prayers. And I have not been able to get back to some of you, but I do appreciate your concern and will be reaching out. It's just been such a very busy time for me the last 2 days. But I've got also some really incredible news that we'll be releasing with my good friend Kylie and um, her new mate, and so that's going to be very exciting, and that'll be all coming up probably within a month or so, as soon as we can get it all set up. But yeah, thanks for asking. And I do pray for even my family, my uncle and my cousin and his wife. I mean, my uncle and his wife in Florida all have COVID or contending with it as well. And so, but of course they're not getting the vaccine and so I'm grateful for that. And they are very against, doing that and taking that action. And so hopefully more and more people will learn as to, what's really going on. But, we're not going to even go into all that, talk about all that, or cover any of all that. People, please do your own research and take care of your health and keep taking, like vitamin C and supplements to keep your immunity up. But yeah, so any particular topic that you wanted to cover or any particular shows that, current events or news items that you wanted to
I
bring
will
forth?
mention, I don't know if we talked about this yet because it's been a couple months, but I bought a school bus. Did we talk about that yet?
Yeah, yeah, and
Okay.
that's awesome because, I don't know if I responded, but back before when I was able-bodied in the last years from the time that I was 19 to 24, I had lived in a van and traveled across the country and stayed in a lot of state parks, national parks, and things like that. And I did a bunch of Grateful Dead shows in between, but that was the most freedom and the most incredible experience, and I was glad I was able to do all that before my injury. But it seems to be a lifestyle now that a lot of people are, breaking bonds with having a house or being locked to one particular location and are either buying buses or RVs or vans or campers, whatever, and are hitting the road and living that kind of lifestyle. And that certainly was something that intrigued me early in my life. But yeah, so please share more about that. Why it was that you decided to buy a van, and if you do plan on traveling or how things are with you.
So I will probably travel, but it is such a big job. What I have to do is gut it out like I would a demo of a house or something.
Yeah, of course.
And the floor I finally got out. It's just you don't know what you're going to need. You don't know the tools you're going to need. You don't know
Right.
the work you're going to have to put in. And it's been hot. It's been 90s to hundreds when I first started this.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I've continued to work on it even through all that heat. And it's funny because I had a friend, she's like, you should be telling people when you make your videos how hot it is when you're doing this. And I'm like, well, I didn't think about it, thought it looked hard enough. But getting the floor out was the first, well, getting all the seats out was the first thing. And that was actually, looking back, one of the easiest things we did. And then getting the floor out. And now I'm working on getting the walls and the ceiling removed. And what's very funny is, and wasn't funny at the time, is I don't know anything about the electrical, so I'm thinking, well, all this electrical looks like it goes to blinkers and the stop sign and blah blah blah. So I'm going to start just unplugging everything. And so I started unplugging all this huge amount of electrical wire all down the side of the bus. And the next thing I knew, and I had started the bus that morning, I went to put the key in, and the bus wouldn't even turn over at all.
Oh
So
no.
I knew that I had killed my bus and I didn't know how to fix it. So I'm like, I got to plug everything back in. So I start plugging everything back in. But there's a couple of plugs that, most of the plugs, they plug back together, they match. But there was a few that
Right.
I couldn't match like that. They were just these single plugs that anything could have gone into them. And there was multiples of them at that spot. So I didn't know which ones had gone in there and which ones didn't. And I thought I tried every version. And so then I was watching videos on how to disable what's called the interlock system. So when you mess with the emergency doors in the electrical, the bus won't start because it thinks the doors are open. And that's what I had done, is messed with that system so the bus would not start. So I'm watching all these videos on how to disable it, and I can't do it. I finally get a guy who'll come out and look at it, and in 5 minutes he plugs in the three things that I thought I had tried every version of plugging these three wires back in. He goes, "Well, give it a try." And I wanted to say it's not going to work. I've done this, and I go to start it, and it starts right up. So
Nice.
it pays to know about some electrical. And I numbered
Yeah.
them. I numbered them 1, 2, 3 on both sides of the wires, so I won't mess that up if I need to unplug them for some reason. I'll be able to plug
Right.
them back in and not mess that up again. But that was a little stressful. And it cost me $100 for that 5-minute visit. But I'll tell you what, it was worth it because I spent a lot of time trying to figure it out myself and I couldn't.
Right. Right. Yeah, and time is money. Especially when you're doing a lot of things that allow you to make, you know, passive income in different ways, which um, I know that you're doing a lot of different things. And so, yeah, time is money. And sometimes it definitely pays to have somebody that knows what they're doing. Because, you could also screw things up worse.
Isn't that the truth?
Um,
I was so grateful it was
right.
just an electrical problem and that it was, and I knew that it probably was. But now it's fun because I'm learning new tools all the time. So I won't go on too
Yeah.
much longer, but I just wanted to say, I'm learning how to use big grinding tools, things that I would have been scared of before. I'm like, I'm going to cut my arm off with that. And you get used to
Uh,
using these bigger tools, and really a lot of hard physical labor work. And now I'm using a pneumatic punch tool with a pneumatic chisel to get off all these rivets. And there's hundreds of rivets, hundreds of them. And so it's just
uh,
little by little by little. But once I get it gutted out, that's when the fun starts because I get to frame it, put the floors in, put the walls in, put the ceiling in, and really start to design, map out what it's really going to be. And I don't know what that is yet. People said, "Do you have a design yet?" And I said, I just can't even, I'm not even there yet. I'm so far from that.
uh, right on. Well, yeah, you learn as you go, and you get an idea for how you want things as well in the process of doing. It's like a drawing or a statue or a piece of art. Um, you start it, and and as you're sculpting or drawing, or as the image starts to fill out, that's when you really kind of get an idea as to what you're shooting for and what you're hoping to achieve, or what you're moving towards with the work that you're doing. So, yeah.
Well, to segue into the topic, I talked to Joy a little bit about revisiting the biblical flat Earth, and the reason is
Uh-huh.
after all this time,
Awesome.
I still have questions. I still wonder things that you have done so much work on and researched. Then I asked other people if they had some questions. So I figure we'll just kind of go through that, some questions from other people, but also myself.
Yeah.
And just to remind everybody, or maybe people don't know, because we probably have a lot of new listeners, that one of the first shows I did with you was to talk about flat Earth because I wasn't a believer of that yet, but I was really
Yeah.
leaning towards that, and not because of scripture, but just because of all the things that I had uncovered at, the red pills, if you want to call it that we take, and all the
Right.
truth I discovered. That was one of the last things I wanted to visit because it just wasn't. I just, the Lord, I think, told me. I think the Most High, our Father in heaven, said, "You don't need to worry about this yet." But then there came a moment where I wanted to start asking questions, and when I tried to ask questions, people weren't very nice about answering them. For whatever reason, I just ran into the not nice group, and I couldn't get my
Right.
questions answered. And so finally, I said, "Can I just come on your show and ask these questions?" And I did, and you answered them, and so wonderfully. But it's been a long time, and it's not a subject that I research, and so I still have a lot of questions about some of these topics, like the flat Earth and the biblical Earth and the biblical and even the Targum nature of the Earth. And so I thought that's what we would talk about again after it's been a couple years.
Oh, yeah. I think that'd be a great topic to revisit, and it's something that still a lot of people are uncertain about, and a lot of people are not very well studied on. So, yeah, certainly I'd be glad to, um, go through the discussion with you. And I think that, the listening audience, we do have a lot of new listeners, and also still, I'd say 97% of the world still believes in a spherical Earth, and that that we live in a solar system where the planets are in revolution around the sun. And so, yeah, this is a topic of great contention. It's one that even to this day I get highly criticized for. And so, yeah, I have no problem with discussing it. And it's something that I've done a lot of research into. I've written 3 books on the topic, and so I do, consider myself to be somewhat educated on this particular discussion. And so, yeah, ask away.
First, if you don't mind, I'd like to give some examples of how often the number 666 is used in the globe model. And I won't carry on
Yeah,
too long, but this is where I actually had to start saying there's something to this, and that bothers me.
right, right, right.
So, firstly, the Earth's axis, its orbital inclination around the sun, according to the globe model, is 66.6 degrees. The Earth's
Hmm.
orbit around the sun is 66,600 miles per hour. The Earth's circumference is 600 times 6 times 6 nautical miles. The speed of sound is 666 knots per second. The force of gravity on Earth is 666 newtons. The Arctic and Antarctic circles are at exactly 66.6 degrees. The distance to the moon is 6 times 60 times 666 miles. The diameter of the moon is 6 times 6 times 60 miles. The sunset is divided by 3 degrees, 6 plus 6 plus 6, aka the civil, nautical, and astronomical twilight. From Mercury, the sun is 666 times brighter, using the inverse square law. Mars is 1.666 astronomical units from the sun. Saturn's orbital distance is 1,426,666,000 kilometers, or 9.54 astronomical units. And the surface temperatures of both Uranus and Neptune are negative 6 times 6 times 6 degrees. Pluto's orbital velocity is 4.666 kilometers per second. And you start to look at these numbers and you think, that's pretty odd that there must be something to all these 666s and the globe
Right.
that we believe in. Maybe you can speak on that for starters.
Yeah, there is well, actually, all the the facts and the numbers that you just brought up, a lot of that was new to me, and so I definitely want you to send me all of that. I'd like to include it and do a revision on a chapter that I wrote about where these numbers do come up. From you take 23.4 degrees from 90 and you get that 66.6, which this particular number 666 comes up in a lot of the numbers, the mathematics, and that are part of spherical trigonometry, or things that are in support of a galaxy or a solar system, or that whole what we refer to in large part as scientism. And so looking at that and examining that, even with the supposed curvature of the Earth, where you are calculating the formula that the distance each mile inversely squared, you have a lot of those numbers as well coming up with 666 within them. And the Bible says that 666 is the number of the beast, and the fact that um, these numbers are found in the computations of a lot of the mathematics that are associated with the supposed solar system, and the Earth being a planet, and the division even of the Earth into hemispheres, things like that, and the location of as far as the tropics and all of that. Even as you said, the speed of the Earth around the sun, the 66,600 miles, so many numbers connected to this. And when you break down the supposed rate of the Earth's motion, it's 1,037.5416666 7 miles per hour, which again is faster than the speed of sound or even a bullet shot from a gun. And yet, when I go outside of my house and I have a 30-foot flagpole, a lot of times, the flag is completely listless and in not even moving. And there's only a very slight breeze. And yet, if we, in my opinion, if we were moving at 1,037 miles an hour eastward, which is supposedly the rate of the motion of the Earth as it travels around the sun, then you would think that you would be able to feel at least some of that motion. I mean, you go driving down the highway, you stick your arm out the window at 60 miles per hour, you feel the wind as it pushes against your arm. You certainly feel the motion of traveling through space and time in that particular vehicle. And if the Earth is moving at that rapid rate of speed, there should also be some movement, some motion that you could detect. And again, that's not what we experience, not what we see. And even, a flag, or like if you burn a pile of leaves and you have a column of smoke that rises straight into the air, yeah, there will be some movement from the wind pushing that smoke off into usually an easterly direction, because the wind does move from west to east according to the topography and the what is that? My gosh, what that was, but um anyways, so again, you see this column of smoke rising up into the air, and that's a sign, in my opinion, that again, there's no motion to the Earth, but there is movement in the wind as it begins to push again. Even a locomotive that is traveling on whether west, east, north, or whatever, it leaves this trail of smoke behind it as it's moving in space. But take also as another example a person that goes up in a hot air balloon. Um, as you travel, you can stay kind of in the same space above the Earth, and it's not moving away from you at 1,037 miles an hour eastward. That, again, in my opinion, shows that the Earth is unmoving, fixed, and stationary, as the Bible states. And as the book of Enoch says, that it is the luminaries which are moving in circle above it. Um, and so, yeah, that's, as far as some of the answers to that numbers, and also some examples of why I know personally that the Earth is a flat circular plane, much like a pizza, or as is depicted in the azimuthal equidistant projection map, which we see on as an icon on the flag of the United Nations map. It shows the true orientation of the Earth, in my opinion. That we see this also in the Gleason map and several other maps dating back and going back in time and history. So
It would be that the globe Earth is a fairly new idea, and even if you wanted to look at a lot of what you could call mythologies, but we know they're not totally mythologies, but they have the same understanding of the creation of Earth. It's always flat, with always some kind of dome, whether it's one of their gods that says the dome or something else. These other creation stories are very much the same. Somebody had a comment when I said, does anybody want to ask questions on this? Because I know I had so many in the beginning. Somebody said, when watching weathermen one day, I realized weathermen pretend to be tracking storms on a globe, but it appears that the storm is moving, not the globe on a screen. And wouldn't this indicate the truth on TV, that the Earth is not moving? Wouldn't the storm and the land be moving at different speeds, but instead they're showing a storm moving over a still Earth?
yeah, again, the storms and even the way that the sun interacts with um, not only the air masses and the pressure in the atmosphere, but also in moving over the waters of the oceans, the lakes, the rivers, causing evaporation, and then also the condensation when the clouds filling up with water droplets, they become heavy and then they rain down these storms. But the interaction of the sun as it moves in circle around the North Pole, and also as it moves back and forth in distance between the two equators, it causes the movement of these high pressure zones, the movement of the winds, the storms, and that causes weather. And again, when you become familiar with that, you see that it is the even the mountains that create cloud systems in the morning. A lot of times the valleys below, like when I lived in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and we used to snowboard. I worked on the mountain as a lifty. We'd get up early in the morning and be out there on the mountain and get it ready for the crowds that were coming. But we also got a chance to snowboard, for an hour before the crowds got on. But I always remember being above the layer of the condensation, and that the Jackson Hole, the town, and the people below were always in that cloud bank, whereas we were above it, and we could watch the sunrise over the mountains, and this is something that they were not able to see. And so things like that, and mountains seem to also create and interact with the clouds and create cloud banks, which is why it's so dangerous on Everest, because a system can move in a matter of minutes, and if you're not off of that mountain when these things happen, you could put your life at risk. But and so, yeah, if you really truly watch and you learn about, even there's a chapter 76 in the book of Enoch that he describes the movements of the winds, the 12 winds, and how the ones that are closer to the northern climates are the ones that bring the snow, and then the ones that are closer to the equator, they bring the rains that benefit the people, and then those that are, in over near where the hottest portion of the earth is, that they bring the dry rain. I mean the dry winds and the heat and so even the winds are described by the Book of Enoch in their interaction with the sun, and creating the weather. And so um, again, in my opinion, when you really study and read the Book of Enoch and the chapters on the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, it describes without a doubt that the earth is stationary, fixed, and unmoving, and it's all the luminaries which are moving in circle. And we see this even in the time-lapse photography of the star trails over a course of an evening, that the sun, together with all of the other luminaries, are moving in circle around Polaris, and none of them move in circle around the sun, which is a fabrication. There's no evidence of that. And the positioning of the stars has remained constant over thousands of years, which is something that could not occur and would not happen in um, in a manner that, if the Earth were truly moving around the sun and the sun were moving around some galactic center, like we're said to be part of the Milky Way galaxy, and even the Milky Way is said to be moving around some great universal center. Well, if all these motions are happening, there's no way that the stars could remain in constant, as far as circular motion around the North Pole. Uh, Only if you are living on a fixed and stationary Earth where the luminaries are moving in circle above it could this phenomena be true. And it, again, is something that even the ancient navigators, they've used Polaris as a star for navigating over, during the night. And they use a astrolabe, to mark out and to plot out their direction and their course on the high seas. And these things again um, you know, are knowledges that could not be constant or utilized if the Earth were moving in circle around the sun moving in circle around the Milky Way center, and then the Milky Way moving around some galactic universal center. All those motions, which they tell us that the Earth is moving again around the sun at 66,600 miles an hour, and then the sun moving around the Milky Way is some millions of miles an hour, and then the motion of the Milky Way galaxy around this grand universal center is also some billions of miles an hour or whatever it is. I mean, it's absolutely insane the rate of speed they say we're moving at. And yet none of this is, as I said, can be witnessed in the creation. You can go outside and look at your flag and see that it's not even moving on a lot of days when there's no storms, no hurricanes, no movement in the atmosphere. And so, and again, one other thing just to reiterate, they say science says that we are moving faster than the speed of sound or a bullet shot from a gun. I mean, that is super fast. And again, you don't detect any motion from the earth. And the Bible says that it is fixed, stationary, and unmoving. So, what are you going to believe? Science, or what you can see and witness with your eyes, and what is clear in evidence of Scripture? And then one other thing that anybody can go out and determine for themselves and check this by just buying a laser pointer, that you can use mirrors over the course of 2 or 3 miles with a strong laser pointer, and you can confirm that there is no curvature to the earth. And anybody anywhere in the world can do this for themselves, verify and prove this for themselves. And if there is no curvature to the earth, as water also, water, the physics of water, the dynamics of water, water will always settle in a level. It will collect in a pool or in a low place in the earth, and then filling that up will settle in a horizontal level. That's why we have what is called sea level. And the horizon, is spread from one end to the other, is completely flat. And there's no curvature to it. Oceans do not settle in a curve. It's absolutely impossible. And so, even the dynamics of water prove that there's no curvature to the earth. Um, and things like being able to see the Statue of Liberty at 60 miles distance, or the cityscape of the Chicago skyline from the shores of Lake Michigan at 60 miles distant. According to the rate of curvature, the Statue of Liberty should be below a mile and a half of curvature, making it impossible to see even, what is the flaming torch that she's holding up with her arm. And things like that. Being able to see the entire island of Oahu from Kauai at 100 miles distance. You should not be able to see even the tips of those mountains if the earth is curved and has curvature, according to what science professes is the rate and the formula for determining said curvature. And so, again, these things are impossible according to science, and yet people see and experience this every day. You will see the Chicago skyline from the shore of Lake Michigan. You can see the Statue of Liberty from New York City or Philadelphia or New Jersey or whatever, the surrounding area. And a lot of people, there's different, like the Atacama Arch in California. There's different things that people can see in excess of what should be possible, which again, lighthouses at 100 miles distance, islands, you can see Cuba from Florida, which is a 30 miles distance, and that should also be impossible. Things like that, again, verify as to what I'm talking about.
I tried to challenge my own women's Bible study because I'm very careful about how much I say. But unfortunately, a lot of these Bible studies are, it's just kind of your normal Christian church get together. And they don't even talk about the book of Revelation, let alone the biblical nature of the earth. But what drives me crazy is these are people I care about, so I'm not bashing them, but I don't understand how they can say, yeah, I believe in that evolution is fake. I believe in the creation, that maybe the
Right.
earth isn't even billions of years old. So like for instance, International Creation Research, ICR, I get their daily readings, and they believe that the earth is only 6,000 years old, and they can show lots of good proof that carbon dating is false, but they believe in the globe still. And when I try to find any homeschool material on the flat earth, it's non-existent. And so I tried to challenge my women's study because we were reading the book of Joshua. And Joshua says in 10:13, and the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? The sun
Right,
stayed in the
right.
midst of heaven, and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. So I challenged my ladies to say, I said, I challenge you to consider this. Why didn't it say the earth stood still? Why did the sun stay still? And the response I got was, Aaron, I can't go there with you on this.
Right.
And
Yeah, of
it's
course.
sad because they
Yeah,
won't
it
even
really is.
consider it.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's a very important passage because it clearly states that, and Joshua was given the authority to make the sun stand still. And if it's the earth, in fact, that is spinning and moving around the sun that causes the sun to rise and set, then why wouldn't God give him authority over the earth and the moon and not the sun and the moon? And so the Bible clearly again shows that it is the sun and the moon which are in movement above the stationary earth and not the opposite. And if you think about it, if because we also have the story in Isaiah of the sun going back 10 degrees as a sign to Hezekiah that he would be able to live and that he wasn't going to be stricken down. And so this was the sign in both Isaiah and Second Kings. So we have two witnesses there as to the sun going back this 10 degrees and then allowed to be, continue in its motion. And if it were the earth which caused, again, the movement of the sun in rising and setting, then the earth would have had to have been stopped in its motion, spun back the other way, and then after moving back 10 degrees, then allowed to continue in its motion, which if you stop the earth from its rotation and it's moving 1,037 miles an hour, there's going to be cataclysm, catastrophic, earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, the waters coming out of their basin, oceans flooding over lands. I mean, there would be catastrophic circumstances come about from that happening, and yet there was none of that. There was no mention of that in the Bible. There was not even a single deviation or a change as to anything that happened to the earth, to its people, to the so-called planet or the plane of the earth as a whole. There was nothing other than the sun was moved back 10 degrees and then allowed to continue in its movement. So again, we see that this depicts, and because there was no repercussions, it shows that again, it is the luminaries which are moving, and the luminaries including the sun, the moon, and the five other planets, so-called planets or wandering stars, the Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. In the ancient scriptures in the Srimad Bhagavatam as well as the Book of Enoch, the sun and the moon are included as planets, wandering stars, but the earth is not included in that categorization because the earth is something completely different than what are said to be the wandering stars. And so the biblical cosmology tells us that the earth is a foundation, a fixed, stationary, unmoving foundation, and that it is the place that we hold as habitation. But that the luminaries move in what is the first and second heaven, and that the firmament, which is a solid structure called the rakia, the like a molten looking glass, as it says in Job, that the firmament is a solid structure which encapsulates and covers over the circle of the earth, the flat plane of the earth. And it's there was a day last year when I was able to see um, this round circular rainbow, and it was a reflection off of the firmament in the skies and the atmosphere, that there was a particular day where the clouds and the just the weather, everything was perfect to where I could see the again the sun reflecting off and creating this rainbow effect off of the firmament, the crystalline structure of the firmament that is um, in in circle or in bowl shape above us. And I was really blown away and amazed at that, because I felt like the Most High was giving me a chance to actually see the firmament in place above us, which was absolutely mind blowing for me.
So someone asked I think a good question that you were talking about it earlier, but I wouldn't want to interrupt you, but it was so specific to what you were saying, that globe Earth scientists claim the Earth spins 1,000 miles per hour from west to east. How can an airplane take off from west to east and ever reach the desired destination if the Earth spins 1,000 miles an hour, but the planes fly 600 miles an hour?
Right, right. Not only that, how could any pilot um, ever land a plane on a runway that is moving at 1,000 miles an hour to the east below them? I mean, air traffic and even the name of an airplane, the plane shows that this vehicle is flying over the plane of the earth. Even the way that a gyroscope works, they can set the earth, the plane in navigation. If it were following the circle of the earth or the earth as a sphere, you would have to keep the nose pointed down in order to stay in alignment with curvature. But that never happens. And we had, our good friend D. Marble, he actually took a level up in the plane with him and showed over the course of the whole flight that the plane was at a perfect level the whole time, except for when it, went up into the air off takeoff, and when it was landing. Um, those were the only time that it deviated as far as being level, which again shows that the airplane is flying over the flat plane, the level plane of the earth. And these are scientific things that you can do to confirm that as a fact. And so people believing that we live on a ball, or, I mean, even, have you ever tried to contain water to a ball? If you pour water on a ball,
No,
it
I
will
haven't
drip
tried
off.
because it doesn't make any sense.
You, it doesn't make any sense. Water cannot contain itself to a ball. It has to be kept in a basin, a sink or a bathtub. And that's the way the oceans work. They are deeper, and they are filled to the rim, even like a cup. A bottle has to contain water. You can't pour water on a ball without it dripping. And especially if you're going to spin it through space at 1,037 miles an hour, there would not be any oceans, And so these kind of things are big fabrications. I mean, it's all propaganda, the way that they've taught us that the world is, and that And it's contrary to what we see with our eyes. When you go to the beach, you go and you watch the sunset, you will see a column of light from the sun all the way to your eyes where you are on the beach. If there were curvature, you would not be able to see a straight line of sunshine as it dances off the waves, as it glistens off of the waves from where the sun is setting, which just means that it's leaving our field of view, not that it's going over the curvature of the earth, because there is no curvature. You will see a column of light all the way from where the sun is disappearing to where you are seated on the ocean watching the sunset. And that would be also impossible. And another thing, too, they tell us that, the sun is 93 million miles away from the earth, which if it were that far, you wouldn't be able to see it. You can't see anything at 93 million miles distant. But you can also see that often watching the sunset, there will be clouds behind the sun.
Well,
And if the sun were
I've seen that behind the
93,
moon.
yeah, and clouds behind the moon as well. And if the sun and the moon are, these millions of miles, or they say the moon is 248 million miles away, or thousands of miles away, or whatever. But the sun is supposedly 93 million miles away from us. How is it that clouds can be behind the sun? It's impossible. Um, and then even when they send up these weather balloons, you can clearly see that the sun is very much smaller and very much local. And so, again, these things are just confirmation that we've been lied to as far as the true dynamics of the way that our uh, the Earth in its interactions with the sun, the moon, and the other planets. We've been lied to as to the dynamics of all of that.
We have a question from the chat. Jeff says, I know the earth is flat and with solid firmament, but I wonder about comets and meteors. I've witnessed them both, but don't know how to answer some that believes the spherical earth on that issue.
Yeah, that's a great question. And well, when we return, I'll read something from the Testament of Solomon's because we are at break. We're about 1 minute out, but according to the only thing that I can find on as far as shooting stars, comets, and meteors, in the Testament of Solomon, it says that these are the fallen angels, and so I'll share something from that. But I do without a doubt believe that we see meteor showers and they happen at specific times of the year. I personally think that this is something where, the sun, as it's moving back and forth between the tropics of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, that it interacts with something that is occurring with the firmament. And I don't know, exactly what that may be, whether it's like perhaps even, like ice that has been frozen to, or that, there's some kind of formation on the structure of the firmament and that the sun burns it off and causes these shooting stars. I don't know exactly what it is myself either, but certainly there is something to it, and it's got to be explained in a way that, again, we're still learning about the true biblical cosmology. But anyways, we will be right back for second hour. We'll be back in about 6 minutes. I don't know if there will that the music will play or not. But
I can
we'll
play
be right
something
back,
on my
everyone.
end. We'll be back soon.
Yeah, we'll be right back, everyone. All right, welcome back everybody for a second hour. We do appreciate you taking the time to be with us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio, and I am joined by my good friend Aaron Moffat, and we do a once a month show called All Things Esoteric. And this evening we are discussing and talking about something that brought us together. Seems like years ago now, Aaron. I don't even know how long it's been, but you were very interested in this topic, and because this is something that I was well versed in and had done a lot of research on, and sharing discussion with you on this topic. This is something that we're reviewing today as well, as far as biblical cosmology. And so I'll turn it back over to you. Feel free
Right.
to ask whatever else you'd like.
The last question, you said you were going to bring up something about Solomon, I think
Oh,
was on the
yeah. That's right. Let me pull that
meteorite
up really
comments.
quickly. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that, but it'll take me just a minute to pull that up. Yeah, that's the only place that I've seen. I'm a student of scripture, and I read all of the extra biblical books, and this is the only place where I've seen in any of the ancient manuscripts, the Apocrypha or whatever, where it actually talks about the phenomena of shooting stars and what it actually describes it as being. And Solomon is questioning, because he was given a ring by the Most High that allowed him to have authority over all of the angels, and the fallen angels, and that he used these particular angels to work on the structure of what became the temple of the Most High God. And so there's one particular portion, it's in, when you look up the Testament of Solomon in chapter 113, I believe. Here it is. I'll read what it says. In 113, and when they were gone, I ordered Orneus to be brought forward and said to him, "Tell me how you know this." Oh, actually, I'll read 112 first, just to give you the context. It's a story about an old man and his son, and how the one of the demons was plaguing him in possession. But I, Solomon, having heard this, said to the demon, "Is that true that thou speakest?" And he answered, "Is it true, O king?" And I, on hearing that, bade them remove the demon, and that they should again bring before me the old man with his son. I bade them make friends with one another again, and I supplied them with food. And then I told the old man after 3 days to bring his son again to me here. And said, I will attend to him. And they saluted me and went their way. The demon had told the Solomon that this particular son would die, and this in fact did take place. And he was asking the demon how he heard and knew that this was going to happen, and he said that he had to fly to the throne of the Most High God and listen in to the Most High, and in council with his angels, where he would sometimes hear news of things that were going to happen prophetically at a later date. And this is what he said about, his attempting to eavesdrop in on the conversations of the council of the mighty, as it says in Psalms 82. And so in verse 113, it says, "And when they were gone, I ordered Orneus to be brought forward and said to him, 'Tell me how you know this.' And he answered, 'We demons ascend into the firmament of heaven and fly about among the stars. And we hear the sentences which go forth upon the souls of men. And forthwith we come, and whether by force of influence or by fire or by sword or by some accident, we veil our act of destruction. And if a man does not die by some untimely disaster or by violence, we demons transform ourselves in such a way as to appear to men and be worshipped in our human nature. I therefore, having heard this, glorified the Lord God. And again I questioned the demons, saying, Tell me how ye can ascend into heaven, being demons, and amidst the stars and holy angels intermingle. And he answered, Just as things are fulfilled in heaven, so also on earth are they fulfilled, the types of all of them. For there are principalities, authorities, world rulers, and we demons fly about in the air, and we hear the voices of the heavenly beings, and survey all the powers. And as having no ground basis on which to alight and rest, we lose strength and fall off like leaves from trees. And men seeing us imagine that the stars are falling from heaven, but it is not really so, O King. But we fall because of our weakness, and because we have nowhere anything to lay hold of. And so we fall down like lightning in the depth of night, and suddenly, and we set cities in flames and fire the fields. For the stars have firm foundations in the heavens, like the sun and the moon. One,
That's
one more
fascinating.
portion. Yeah. And so the demon, and if you read the Ascension of Isaiah, which is a story about Isaiah being taken up through the seven heavens, just like the book of the secrets of Enoch. Enoch was also taken up through the seven heavens and brought before the throne room of the Most High God. Well, in the Ascension of Isaiah, it shows Isaiah being taken up through these heavens. He makes mention of how there are up to the six heavens, there's a throne on the left and on the right, and that both the good and the bad angels have a place on each of the layers of the firmament leading up to the six heavens. And then once you get to the sixth heaven, there's no place of rest for the fallen angels. They're not allowed um, to settle or to rest in that particular higher portion of the atmosphere. And they certainly have no place in the seventh heaven, which is the throne room of the Most High God, which sits upon the vaulted dome of the earth. What John says is a sea of glass like unto crystal, which again, the firmament is made of this semi-crystalline structure, an impenetrable barrier, uh, holding the waters above from the waters below, according to what it says in Genesis. But anyways, and so because they cannot rest, and if they do want to eavesdrop in on the conversations of the Almighty with his holy angels, they have to fly all the way from what is the sixth heaven to the seventh heaven, which is a great distance, and then not being able to rest anywhere, they stay up as long as they can, but then being wore out, they fall in what is flaming fire, and they are what we see in perspective as shooting stars. So yeah, it's a truly fascinating portion of text.
And I have not heard it, so that was very fun new information for me. Back when, like you said, we talked about this, I would say it's been a couple years, at least two, maybe longer, but you I asked you about the tides and that people believe the moon moves the tides even though the
Right.
moon really has no gravitation itself. Would you mind recapping what, because we talked about a flat and hollow earth, didn't we? And you
Yes.
explained
Yeah.
why the tides happen, and I can't, I tried to tell somebody the other day, and I'm like, I don't even remember. I don't remember how he said it, so I wanted to ask again and hear it again, so maybe I can repeat it better this time.
Yeah, I'll actually, not only will I read a portion, tell you about it, but also I'll share something from one of my books where I talked about and covered that in great detail. So let me see if I can pull up. In the both of my books, Paradise um, and the Firmament, I have great a lot of chapters written about this particular topic, but let me
And just so
pull it
people
up
know,
from.
I have your website. I've shared it in the chat already, but I also have it in that little description box that nobody looks at. So everybody check out the description box. It has the website for these books, where I highly recommend going and checking out. You can get them as ebooks or physical books, however you want to do it.
Yes, and if you get them as ebooks, I encourage you to also share them with whoever you would like, because we don't have a problem with people doing that, and that way you can learn. You can learn more about this. But let me just explain firstly, as far as the tides, because science tells us that it is the moon and the gravitation of the moon that draws the waters to it and causes the high and the low tide. But in the cosmology of the Bible and also in the stories of the ancients, in the text called the Inventio Fortunata, which is a 14th century text written by voyagers and adventurers. They share the stories of how traveling to the center of the earth, and when I mean center, I mean the North Pole, because if you look at the azimuthal equidistant projection map and also the flag as far as the United Nations, which shows the true topography of the Earth and the continents encircle around the North Pole, that the Earth is much like a flat, like a pizza, and that the Antarctic ice wall is around the edges, and all the oceans and the waters of the oceans are contained by those walls, which form this basin. And the at the very North Pole, that's what's called in the Celtic mythology Helvelgumr. It's called the navel of the earth, or what is the water spout, a whirlpool, which every 6 hours, this water spout, or this what's called in the Bible the bottomless pit, the abysmal chasm, that the waters of the ocean are sucked in, uh, drunk, sucked in by this particular whirlpool, and then every 6 hours it changes direction. So for 6 hours, it will suck all of the oceans of the world in, and this causes what we call low tide, and then it will expel the oceans in a geyser for 6 hours. And so for twice a day, we have these low tides and these high tides, and it's all according to whether this particular phenomena, this water spout, this abysmal chasm, which is also the entrance into the hollow earth, and that this is the gateway to what is called Sheol, or hell. The abysmal chasm, the bottomless pit, and in Isaiah 14, where Lucifer says, I will exalt my throne above the stars and the clouds of God. I shall be like the Most High, that I will establish my throne above the mount of the congregation and the sides of the north. Well, at the very top of the North Pole, there's this mountain called the Rupus Negra, the black rock. And this particular mountain is a magnetic lodestone mountain. It's a black magnetite mountain. And that's why all of the compasses point north. And this particular mountain, it's said that when the ships came close to it, because there's 4 rivers that lead into this particular whirlpool, and this whirlpool surrounds this mountain, this lodestone magnetite mountain. And the adventurers in the, in this particular Invention Fortunata, when they described encountering this mountain, and the only reason why they were able to survive is that it was at the time that the waters, they were sucking them in, but then all of a sudden they were expelled back out. And so their lives were spared. But it describes how many other ships, that even the iron that is part of the anchors or whatever on these ships, the nails, that they were attracted to this mountain and were drawn in to their destruction, being sucked down into this abysmal chasm. And so let me go to chapter 15 of this particular book, and I'll share you some stories that I share in my book, Paradise, the Sides of the North and the Mount of the Congregation, because it's absolutely fascinating. This was also in the mythology of Odysseus and the Iliad, and also in the Aeneid and the story of Jason and the Argonauts. This particular structure was called Charybdis, and it was believed to be a sea monster. And it describes this sea monster as being something that swallowed the waters of the oceans and destroyed the ships. And so, the Bible speaks about the foundations or the bounds, and it's the Antarctic ice wall that gives and holds all the waters of the world in. And all these things are also described in the book of Enoch. I'll read a portion. It says, "And then I made firm the heavenly circle and made that the lower water, which is under heaven, collect itself together into one whole, and that the chaos became dry. And it became so. Out of the waves I created rock hard, big, and from the rock I piled up the dry. And the dry I called the earth, and the midst of the earth I called the abyss, that is to say, the bottomless. I collected the sea in one place and bound it together with a yoke. And I said to the sea, Behold, I give you your eternal limits, and you shall not break loose from your component parts. And thus I made fast the firmament." This is Yahushua talking to Enoch. But in the tide cycle, I'll share with you the story from Odysseus, and then I'll read a portion. Because, again, the sea monster is called Charybdis, and it says of Charybdis, "The sea monster Charybdis was believed to live under a small rock on one side of the narrow channel. Opposite her was Scylla, another sea monster that lived inside a much larger rock." And this is from Odysseus, the book 12. "The sides of the strait were within an arrow shot of each other, and sailors attempting to avoid one of them would come in reach of the other. To be between Scylla and Charybdis therefore means to be represented with two opposite dangers, the task being to find a route that avoids both. Thrice a day, Charybdis swallowed a huge amount of water before belching it back out again, creating large whirlpools capable of dragging a ship underwater. in some variations of the story, Charybdis was simply a large whirlpool instead of a sea monster. And so this particular object is, again, in the stories of Odysseus, what is described as the abysmal chasm, Helvelgamer, the story of this whirlpool which sits at the center of the Earth's plane, which surrounding the magnetic mountain, it sucks in the oceans of the world. And when it does that, it causes low tide. And then expelling them out, it creates what we call high tide. And so um, it's not the moon which causes the tides, but this particular um, the navel of the earth, as it calls it. I'll read a portion from one of the stories of Odysseus, which describes this mountain as well as this whirlpool. It says, Circe advises Odysseus on the dangers that he will face on his voyage. On the other side are a pair of cliffs, one of them with its jagged peak reaches up to the spreading sky, wreathed in dark cloud that never parts. There is no clear sky above this peak, even in summer or harvest time, nor could any mortal man climb up it or get a foothold on it, not if he had 20 hands and feet. So smooth is its stone as if it were burnished all over. This again is describing this, the black Rupus Negra, the black rock, which is it's also the tallest mountain in the world. And it lies at the center of the Earth's plane. Halfway up the cliffs is a murky cave, the home of Scylla, facing northwest to Erebos. You will see the other cliff opposite Scylla lies lower, no more than an arrow's flight away. On this there grows a great leafy fig tree under it. Awesome Charybdis sucks the dark water down. 3 times a day she belches it forth. 3 times in hideous fashion she swallows it down again. Pray not to be caught there when she swallows down. Poseidon himself could not save you from destruction then. And so in the times of, back during Homer and Odysseus, it must have been that this particular whirlpool changed direction 3 times. But, again, in our day and age, it shifts direction every 6 hours. And so I'm going to read something else from the Inventio Fortunata, which describes this particular phenomenon. It says, and not far from the shore which we before spoke of, on the west where the ocean extends without bounds, is that very deep abyss of waters which we commonly call the ocean's navel. It is said twice a day to suck the waves into itself and to spew them out again, as is proved to happen all along these coasts, where the waves rush in and go back again with fearful rapidity. By the whirlpool of which we have spoken, it is asserted that ships are often drawn in with such rapidity that they seem to resemble the flight of arrows through the air, and sometimes they are lost in the gulf with a very frightful destruction. Often just as they are about to go under, they are brought back again by a sudden shock of the waves, and they are sent out again, thence with the same rapidity with which they were drawn in. In the Gesta Hamburgianus Ecclesia Pontificum, the Archbishop Aldebert speaks about a team of noble Frisians, which setting sail in hopes to explore the North Polar region in 1035 to 1043 AD, heading north beyond Greenland, of a sudden they fell into that numbing ocean's dark mist, which could hardly be penetrated with the eyes. And behold, the current of the fluctuating ocean whirled back to its mysterious fountainhead, and with most furious impetuosity drew the unhappy sailors who in their despair now thought only of death on to chaos. This, they say, is the abysmal chasm, that deep in which report has it that all the backflow of the sea, which appears to decrease, is absorbed and in turn revisited, as the mounting fluctuation is usually described. As the partners were imploring the mercy of God to receive their souls, the backward thrust of the sea carried away some of their ships, but its forward ejection threw the rest far behind the others. Freed thus by the timely help of God from the instant peril they had had before their eyes, they seconded the flood by rowing with all their might. So this is from a text in an article called "What Causes the Ocean's Tides." And so, again, as I described, it is this uh, abysmal chasm, the Havelgamer, this ocean navel, the navel of the ocean, this whirlpool at the center of the earth, which sucking in the oceans and expelling them out again is truly what causes the phenomena of the tides.
I'm going to remember that a lot better this time because I remember there was a reason. I did remember that there was a reason that it made the compass turn north, but I couldn't recall
Right.
that it was a huge magnetic mountain. And I believe that
Yes.
this was created for us to know, but that's why they keep us away from it. Planes aren't even
Right.
allowed to fly over the North Pole.
Exactly. That's right. And it's because, again, this particular mountain, you can't fly directly over this North Pole because it says that this mountain is the tallest in the world, and that even if the sun were to move and circle above it, it would actually run into it. That's how high it's said to go. That it reaches up to the very throne of the Most High God, which we know that his throne is on top of the firmament.
So there was a question that you may have kind of answered in the Solomon thing. So I hope if you answered it, forgive me, but I'm taking questions that I got in my Discord channel one after the other. And one of the
Yeah,
questions
sure.
was curious about the Targums. I'm curious about the Targums mentioning more in detail about the biblical earth. They seem to go deeper and more clearly into topics more familiar translations rather than leaving things vague. Also wondering if there's a confirming witness to what the Testament of Solomon says about shooting stars, and I know you did talk about that. But he says being the rebellious ones flying up to heaven to listen to the Most High, give instruction to the heavenly host, and then falling in a flash of light when it's exhausted. You did read that. I think that you covered that.
Yes.
And then he says,
Yes.
I'm curious about why exactly did the wandering stars, planet gods, break away from their set circuit? Are they just rebellious luminaries, or did they mean something more than that?
That's a great question. And in my opinion, I have no evidence of this, but in my opinion, I think that the wandering stars, or what were said to be the wandering stars in ancient times, that they deviated from their assigned courses. And I believe they came down here to the earth and they interacted with humanity in a way where they presented themselves to be gods. And not only that, but they, according to the stories in the Greek mythology and the Roman mythology, they interacted in the same way that the Watchers did, and they took wives of human women. Even in the story of Atlantis that was brought forth by Plato, he describes how Poseidon had taken a, a, a wife of a earth woman named Cleito, and that he had 5 sets of twins from her, and that the eldest amongst them was um, this what's the name? It's I can't remember the name of the eldest. Atlas. and it's Atlas that we get the name of the Atlantean Ocean, and also the name of the continent Atlantis, which was said to be, this continent of 10 rings, that there was, you know, these rings that also formed these ports that the ships could land at, and that the structure of Atlantis was situated in this manner. But that, the true God, the Most High God, Yahuwah, Yahweh, Jehovah, as people, reference uh, Yahuwah, uh, he brought judgment upon Atlantis and as to what they were doing, because they were engaging in black magic and ritual where they were conjuring up devils and demons, and interacting with them and doing blood sacrifice and things that were considered abomination, offering their children in, ritual. And so, because of that, destruction was brought upon Atlantis from above and below, and even the floods, the tsunamis that were created from the earthquakes and the lightnings and the devastation of meteor showers from above. They devastated um, this particular landmass, and it was swallowed in a single night and disappeared from all but memory. Even the Bible in Ezekiel chapter 26 speaks about this people, this seafaring people of aforetime, of old, the people of old, and this continent of old that was sucked down and swallowed by the oceans, by the seas, and forgotten, all but to memory. And so, when you look up the particular Greek and the Hebrew for those particular words, it speaks about a very ancient primeval time. And so, again, in my opinion, this associating this event and speaking about what in the mythology we see as the destruction of Atlantis. And so, and if people want to know more and you want all of the ancient sources and all of the quotations for all of this, my newest books, the two books that I just wrote, The Pre-Adamites and the Antediluvian World, and also um, the Dragon Lords, the Antediluvian Kings. These two books cover these subjects in great detail and share so much information about the destruction of the first world age and Atlantis, and how the fallen angels ruled during that time. If you're specifically wanting to know more about the structure of the earth, biblical cosmology, the luminaries as they move above the earth, the three books that I wrote on the flat earth and the firmament, the flat earth as key to decrypt the book of Enoch, the firmament vaulted dome of the earth, and then paradise, the sides of the north and the mount of the congregation. These three books go into great detail about those topics and elaborate and share, as far as the structure of the Rupus Negra, the black rock at the center of the earthen plane, its connections to the Mount of the Congregation, what is called Mount Zion in the Bible, Mount Olympus in the Greek mythology, Mount Meru in the Hindu mythology, the Srimad Bhagavatam. All of this is contained in those books, so you can look to those for that information.
Another thing that came up in our topic of discussion in the Discord channel was the similarity of the creation understanding, ancient Hebrew conception, or even if you want to look at some mythological creation stories, and the similarity to an eyeball. Have you gone into that area of research?
Yeah, actually, I have a quote where I cover that. Also in this book, Paradise Sides of the North, because I found this quote that speaks about that exact thing in the what is called the Legends of the Jews, I believe, is where I got that quote. And I'll also share this passage from the Targum, the a verse in Ecclesiastes that says in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 7, all the rivers and springs of water continually flow into the water of the ocean, which surrounds the world like a ring, but the ocean is not filled to the places where the rivers continually flow. They return there in order to flow from the spouts of the deep. And so, the Bible says of this, the spouts of the deep, that is also what's called Havelgamer. The world, the navel of the world. In the Legends of the Jews, in chapter 1, it says, also the world resembles the ball of his eye. The ocean that encircles the earth is likened to the white of the eye. The dry land is the iris, Jerusalem the pupil, and the temple the image mirrored in the pupil of the eye. In the book of First Clement, in chapter 20, it says, the basin of the boundless sea gathered together by his workmanship into its reservoirs passeth not the barriers wherewith it is surrounded. But even as he ordered it, so it doeth. For he said, so far shalt thou come, and thy waves shall be broken within thee. The ocean which is impassable for men, and the worlds beyond it, are directed by the same ordinances of the master. And so, it describes the boundless sea and the reservoirs in this particular basin. And so when you look up the word basin, it also describes, something that is like a bathtub. So the oceans are held by this giant basin. Um, and that's why we see, the Antarctic walls being the outer circle, or the place that God, the Most High, Yahuwah, declares is the place that contains and holds all of the oceans of the world. In Job chapter 38, it says, or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? When I made the cloud the garment thereof, and thick darkness a swaddling band for it, and break up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors, and said, hitherto shalt thou come, but no further, and here shall thy pride waves be stayed. And so, it speaks about in several places in the Bible about the outer bounds, the outer limits of what is the circle of the earth. And in Proverbs, it describes the uh, the the earth being inscribed, the circle of the earth being inscribed upon the waters of the deep. And so, all these things are uh, speaking about the same thing when you understand true biblical cosmology.
We have another question. If the Earth is flat, how do we explain the eclipse?
In the Srimad Bhagavatam, as well as in the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, and also in Samuel Burley Robotham, in his book on Zetetic astronomy, he speaks about these two objects called Rahu and Ketu, which are these dark stars, these objects that don't emit light, but that do exist in the heavens, and that only appear during the eclipses when they interact with the light of the sun. or with the light of the moon. And eclipsing those objects during that time, we are able to see them as they come forth and block out the light of these two particular objects during what is the phenomena of a solar or a lunar eclipse.
Okay, so we had an off-topic question that I may not be able to get to because I did have another question. So sorry, Sherry, if I can't get to the off-topic question. And another thing that me and my girls talked about recently was if Antarctica, right, is the whole ice wall around the Earth, or so, on the edges, then that would indicate, right, that sometimes Antarctica would be in the day and some of Antarctica would be in the night, right?
Yeah, as again, as the sun circles around the North Pole, that when it is in the outer regions over what is like South Africa, Australia, South America, um, the sun is moving in very quick fashion, which is why the people that are living in Australia, they'll tell you that the sun rises very quickly. You don't see a very slow sunrise in Australia or a very slow sunset. Like in the Arctic, when the sun is at the Tropic of Cancer, its revolution is very small, very tight. And that's why we see that in the Arctic during the time when the sun is located at the Tropic of Cancer, you see a great meltdown. And it's because the sun is moving in slow, quite very tight circle. And this is also what we see as the midnight sun phenomena, that you'll see the sun remain above the horizon for 72 hours without ever setting, which again shows us that, it is the sun which is moving in circle around the North Pole and not the Earth, which is actually moving in circle around the sun. But when the sun reaches the outer perimeter of the Earth, and where the Tropic of Capricorn is located, it's moving in a very big circle, a huge revolution, which is 3 times its revolution when it's located at the Tropic of Cancer, because the Tropic of Cancer is a circle closest to the North Pole, whereas the Tropic of Capricorn is when the sun is at its furthest away from the North Pole and it's traveling at its fastest. It shifts its rate of speed every day as it moves either towards the North Pole, because it's moving at its slowest when it reaches the Tropic of Cancer, and then it's moving at its fastest and it speeds up as it starts to uh, create bigger and larger rotation and revolution as it moves out towards the outer perimeter of the circle of the Earth. And so when you look at a map, especially as I've shown it in um, my books, The Flat Earth Has Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, and I explain the movement of the sun as it's going back and forth through what Enoch calls the 6 gates of heaven, that it is speeding up and slowing down. And so this is another thing that, people can look to understand that, it is the sun, which is again moving in circle above the face of the earth, and not the sun. I mean, the earth spinning in circle around, according to the solar system around the sun.
So this is my actual last question that I have, which is great because we only have 13 minutes or less left.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Um, there are people, including myself, that wonder, is it possible that the earth is a square? Because the Bible, and I'm just talking mainly the scriptures, not extra biblical text, and I'm sure you could answer this better because of the understanding of extra biblical text that you know. But we wonder, is it possible the earth is a square, as in the four corners of the earth? And is it possible that it's not round, like you say, like a pizza, but actually the four corners are literal?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that the circle of the earth is inscribed upon a square, and that what we see with regard to, the Masons, the Freemasons, and what they show as the compass and the square, these two particular objects, which are symbols of the heaven and the earth, and the way they are unified, just like we see in Amos chapter 9:6, where it speaks about uh, the firmament as the vaulted dome of the earth, and that is unified in structure to the earth, that it comes down and joins in union to the earth. The square and the compass, which the Masons use as a symbol for their mystery school knowledge, that they are wiser than the rest of us and that they are the chosen ones. That actually is a symbol for the circle of the earth inscribed upon a square. And so, yeah, even the Masons know that, the earth is a square and has four corners, as the Bible says, but that the circle of the earth being inscribed upon the waters of the deep, that because the sun is moving in circle and moving back and forth between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, when it reaches its outer limit and is moving so very quickly and so very fast, it's for this reason that the outer circle of the Antarctic does not get a lot of sunshine. And because of that, it never has a chance to melt like the regions in the Arctic do. And it's for this reason that in Antarctica, you have 2 miles of ice and snow mounted on top of each other, creating these ice walls, which are uh, in excess of 2 miles high. And so that's why the outer circle of the Antarctic ice wall is called the outer limits, or the ends of the earth in the Bible. Um, but yes, that is, I do believe that if you were to extend out beyond and um, to search out, that it would prove that the earth is again inscribed upon this square, and that it has four corners as mentioned within scripture.
I do have another question myself. You've, of course, seen maps where it talks about there's gates out into other lands that are even beyond what
Yes,
we know, that there are gates through the ice into other even oceans and lands, right? You've talked about that?
yes, yes, I have. And again, in the book Paradise Sides in the North and the Mount of the Congregation, there is a map that I provide in chapter 17, the ocean basin, Sharbardis, and the tidal rhythm. And in the Hawaii Gazette, and I believe it was like 1958, it shows a map, and it says, was this world map made 10 centuries ago? And this map was found by um, a man who was a Buddhist monk for a time and stayed in a monastery. And it shows again the map that is found on the flag of the United Nations, the continents of the world in circle around the North Pole. But in this map, there are many other continental land masses in the outer regions beyond what we know to be the outer regions of the Antarctic Circle. And it says, in chapter 24 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Beneath that world, there is the world of Mahathala, which belongs to the descendants of Kadru, who have a reputation as a bunch of ever angry, many hooded, cruel snake types, as there are the notorious Kuhakala, Takshaka, Kaila, and Sushiana. Most addicted to material happiness, they all live with the shortest temper. They have 5, 7, 10, 100, or 1,000 hoods with on their crests fixed the most valuable gems, the effulgence of which disperses the vast darkness of the caves of Padalala. And so, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it also mentions these worlds that are beyond our world, and that the Naga, these reptilian serpent-like beings, that they live there in these particular worlds. There's also a biblical manuscript called the History of the Rechabites, which speaks about a place that some of the elect live that is beyond the reach of our physical world. And it's much like what we see in, the Wonder Woman, where the Amazonians live in this world, which is hidden to the sight or hidden to our perspective. And, but, sometimes people are able to breach those limits and to enter into these worlds. And just like the ancient explorers and the tales of the Inventio Fortunata, they also describe and they speak about having access to um, the North Pole, which we no longer are allowed to go there or to fly over the North Pole. The governments prohibit people from going there, getting there, and even of going beyond Antarctica, which again is the outer circle of the Earth. Um, are there worlds beyond that? I do believe so, according to the maps and to the ancient mythologies, but for some reason we are not allowed to explore, to even, to begin travels in those directions. And so, the world government, the Illuminati elitists, they know something which they are keeping secret from us, but I do believe these ancient maps and mythologies are hinting to worlds beyond what we are privy to see.
Well, it makes sense when you're out on a boat and a ship comes and says, or like a government boat comes out and says, "Oh, you're in uncharted waters. You can't be here," and they're very adamant that you must turn around now, and you cannot travel any
Right,
further.
right,
You're in airspace you can't be in. You must turn around now, and they'll send out jets after the people
right.
who go into an area that they're
And
not allowed to
boats,
go.
yeah, they absolutely contain all that, and they are keeping something secret. I mean, just look at the Antarctic Treaty. There's never been a time where all the nations of the world agree to not exploring or tapping into the natural resources or, exploiting a region of the world. Never. It's always been that corporations have fought hard and paid off governments to gain access. But yet, with the Antarctic Treaty, that is not the case.
What a pleasure to be able to tap into your brilliant mind and to be able to revisit this topic that kind of first wasn't exactly first brought us together. Interestingly enough, it was on the serpent seed, which somebody was talking about in the chat, which would be a great
Right. Yeah.
conversation to revisit again another day. But I appreciate
We'll do it.
your knowledge. I appreciate the research. I appreciate the books. We appreciate your website, but more so, I appreciate you would be willing to come on my channel or let me come on yours and have ask these questions that for some people they think it's a common knowledge, but for some of us we don't know who to ask or where to ask or how to ask because we're kind of afraid of the answer sometimes.
Well, not a lot of people have those answers either. So, but anyways, we have reached the end of the show. So be blessed, everybody. Good speaking with you, Aaron. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, all. Shalom.
So real when we're young, a table full of family for years. Heartbreak, a song that we've both sung, a minor tune that tells a bit of tears. But I won't be a friend who flees. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your God will be my God. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your God will be my God. Like a lightning flash so bright, a tragedy transformed in front of me. You listen, still I don't know why, but mercy found me right there in the field. How can it be I've been redeemed? Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your God will be my God. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your God will be my God.